Good afternoon, Western Washington, and happy Friday. I'm Matthew Fab with Western Washington Weather, and today we're going to take a continuing look at this heat wave that is now underway across Western Washington and will go all the way into next week. So we'll start with that, but first just take a look at this satellite imagery. Completely clear across the entirety of Western Washington. Most of the Pacific Northwest completely clear as well. Just a couple fires there, one in northwest Montana, one in the Idaho Panhandle producing a decent amount of smoke, and then new one here near the central part of Oregon there. Otherwise, Western Washington looking beautiful. No smoke coming off the Gulch fire right now, so that is good to see as well. Just really cool to see these kind of days on the satellite imagery. So taking a look here, we have a lot of alerts going on right now. You can see this tan color. That is a fire weather watch in the Olympics and in the Cascades, and that is basically for very low humidity, high temperatures, and the potential for rapid fire growth. So we really do have to watch the Gulch fire and any other fires very closely. This purplish color here is an extreme heat warning. That is what used to be known as an excessive heat warning, but now it's an extreme heat warning. That is in effect for the eastern Puget Sound lowlands and the mountain valleys and foothills. And these are the new forecast zones, so we have a much more accurate depiction of where this is in effect for, and then all of eastern Washington, and then down into Southwest Washington and the Portland metro area. And then all the orange you see is the heat advisory in effect for the I-5 corridor from Lewis County all the way to the Canadian border, including Seattle, Tacoma, Everett, and Olympia, and then parts of the inland areas just inland from the Washington and Oregon coasts there, and the Coast Range and stuff like that, and parts of eastern Washington as well. So taking a look at that extreme heat warning for the foothills, temperatures ranging from the upper 80s to upper 90s and low temperatures in the 60s. That's very hazardous. In addition, low temperatures remaining in the 60s, and that is from 11 a.m. Friday to 5 a.m. Tuesday, so a very long duration advisory there. And then the heat advisory, that last one's a warning. This is the advisory, showing temperatures in the mid-80s to 90s with low temperatures in the 60s, and this is for the Seattle metro area. And this really has a high chance of heat-related illness if you are in the sun, if you're too hot, stuff like that. So, again, 11 a.m. Friday to 5 a.m. Tuesday. And then this is from the National Weather Service in Seattle, looking at the NWS Heat Risk graphic here. The Heat Risk is a system that the Weather Service came up with a few years ago to kind of communicate heat impacts better to the public. So this is Friday, so this is today's. You can see orange, so level 2 heat risk for most of the metro area, and then some areas in some of those mountain valleys with the level 3 heat risk. And then take a look at Saturday. Those highs are going to get up into the 90s, and you can see that red level 3 heat risk is in parts of the metro area there, especially east of I-5, and then up in the foothills as well. So let's start diving into the pattern here. You can see the European model. We're looking at the ridge that is dominating the area here across the southwest and pushing up into western Washington. This is what's causing those clear skies and the hot temperatures. And you can see how this just hangs out all the way through this weekend, this heat dome going all the way into Monday. And then as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we have a little bit more uncertainty in the forecast. Yesterday talked about how this forecast wasn't showing much rain at all. Now it's showing potential thunderstorms here as we go into in the middle of next week. So we really have to watch it closely. You see this trough offshore. That could bring some thunderstorms up into the area on Thursday and maybe Friday. So it's something we have to watch very closely next week. And then let's take a look right at these temperatures here. So we just looked at that ridge, and that is why we have this heat wave. But here are those temperatures for western Washington. So this is Friday. So today, highs likely from Seattle northward in the low 80s to low 90s. Hottest east of I-5. That's a trend we will see. From Seattle southward, we have highs in the upper 80s to low 90s. And from Olympia down to Portland, highs in the low to mid 90s. Southwest Washington from Longview all the way down into Portland, likely in the upper 90s to low 100s. And take a look at the coast. Hoquiam at 84, Quileute Airport near Forks at 85, and the beaches themselves in the mid-70s. So just a very, very nice day out on the Washington coast. The same thing as we go into Saturday. We warm up even more. Seattle northward, highs in the mid-80s to mid-90s. Hottest there east of I-5, and then from Seattle southward, highs in the low 90s to maybe the mid-90s, few upper 80s around the water, low to mid-90s from Seattle south, Olympia down to Portland, upper 90s to low 100s, 102 potentially there around Portland there on Saturday. So just very, very hot down there. And then the coast, again, beaches in the mid-70s, just inland in the low to mid 80s there. You can see 86 in Forks, 84 in Hoquiam, 80 in Astoria, very hot along the coast there, and then, of course, in the metro areas as well. And then as we go into Sunday, we cool down a little bit on the coast as that onshore flow starts to return. Beaches go back to the low to mid 70s, inland into the upper 70s to low 80s, but those temperatures still remain quite warm here as in the interior. From Seattle northward, highs in the mid 80s to mid 90s, again hottest in those foothill areas and valleys east of I-5. And then from Seattle southward there on Sunday, highs in the low to mid 90s yet again. Olympia down to Portland, highs in the mid to upper 90s, likely 99 to 100 degrees again in Portland. And so this is just continuing to be hot, and this is why this heat wave is not really record breaking in terms of temperatures or anything like that. We may set a few daily records here and there, but it's just the duration of it, because you can see as we go into Monday, we just remain really warm. The coast cools back to the mid 70s as some of that onshore flow returns, but the onshore flow doesn't have much of an influence as it gets back inland. So you can see by the time you get over to Olympia, you're still in the mid 90s. Seattle southward, they're in upper 80s to mid 90s again on Monday. Seattle northward, low 80s to low 80s there near the water, mid 80s to low 90s again in the mountain valleys and areas east of the freeway. And then again, there's Seattle southward, highs in the upper 80s to low 90s, and then Olympia to Portland, highs in the mid 90s to upper 90s there from Longview southward. And then as we go into Tuesday, we cool down a little bit more on the coast, upper 60s to mid 70s, and inland, Seattle northward, highs in the low 80s to low 90s, but those low 90s are more isolated in some of the valleys, and it's mainly low to mid 80s. From Seattle southward, highs in the upper 80s to low 90s again. Olympia to Portland, highs in the low to mid 90s. So you can see as we go into Tuesday, we are cooling down, but some of the valleys like Puyallup and Auburn, and then areas from Tacoma southward are still in the low 90s. And then going into Wednesday, the coast goes back to the upper 60s to low 70s, back to more normal temperatures for this time of year, but still a little bit elevated from what they're seeing at this time of August. And then Seattle northward on Wednesday, highs in the low 80s to mid 80s. There may be some upper 70s along the water in like Bellingham, Whidbey Island, and stuff like that. But from Seattle southward there on Wednesday, we're still having highs in the mid to upper 80s, a few low 90s possible. And then Portland, you're looking at highs in the low 90s. And then by the time we get to Thursday, we likely cool down back to the upper 70s to low 80s for most of the region. But this is a little bit more uncertain at this time. So going back through this, you can really just see the duration of this. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 days. But 6 straight days, 85 plus in the Seattle metro area is very likely. At least 3 of those days could be 90 plus as well. And that's only half the threat, though. Taking a look here at the National Blended Models low temperatures forecast. So this is Saturday morning low temperatures. You can see mid-60s in Seattle, upper 50s to low 60s for most of western Washington. And then look at this upper 60s near 70 for the Portland metro area and southwest Washington. Gets worse as we go into Sunday morning as we don't have much time to cool down from that heat, multiple 90-plus days there, and you can see highs or the lows there around Seattle and Tacoma in the mid 60s, upper 60s, low 70s around Portland. Most of western Washington in the low to mid 60s there for lows Sunday morning. And then same thing on Monday morning, mid 60s for Seattle, upper 60s for Portland, and then low to mid 60s for most of western Washington. And this then continues to Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning, and then by Thursday morning we are finally starting to cool a little bit more down to the low 60s for the metro areas, maybe some mid 60s still around Portland. But this is just as hazardous really as the high temperatures, is that we're not able to cool down below like 65 for most of the cities, and even outlying areas may not even get below 60. So this is just where you have to be really vigilant for if you know you struggle with heat, or if you know people that do struggle with heat, and especially if you don't have air conditioning, there is just not very much temperature recovery as you go into the nights and then back into the mornings. And then again, I pointed this out yesterday, but this is looking at tomorrow afternoon, so Saturday afternoon there, and you're looking at highs across the region, likely between 15 and 25 degrees above average. So just really interesting to see that. Just this is kind of anomalous. As you get later into the year, the average temperatures start to decline a little bit. So then anytime you get heat waves, it is much more above average than we were looking at previously in the summer. And then another thing to point out, we talked about that fire weather watch in the Cascades and Olympics earlier in the video here, and this is the high-resolution rapid refresh model. We're looking at a very high-resolution forecast of humidity here. So as we go into Friday afternoon, so this is this afternoon here, you can see the humidity across the Seattle metro area and most of the I-5 corridor between 30 and 40% up here north of Seattle, 20 to 25% from Seattle westward and southward. And then look at the Cascades, 15 to 25%, Portland 10 to 20% there, Eastern Washington very low levels as well. And this is the exact same thing we're going to see, but even to a greater extent as we go into Saturday afternoon. Look at Saturday afternoon there. Most of the Puget Sound area here has humidity between 15 and 25%, maybe some areas near 30%, but that is just really hazardous. And look at the Olympics near the Bear Gulch fire there, below 30%, Cascades 15 to 25%, Portland 10 to 20%, and it's just, you even get some single-digit humidity out here in Eastern Washington, and this is just really bad for any fire growth because it was just so extremely dry, and we've already been quite dry. Even though we had the atmospheric river not that long ago, we are still very dry across the region, and this doesn't help at all, especially with any fire spread. So really be on the lookout. Don't burn anything during this heat wave, because when you have humidity at 15% in Tacoma, for example, you don't want to be burning anything because it's just so extremely dry. And speaking of it being dry, this is the Bear Gulch fire, containment 11%, 8,500 acres. They are expecting an uptick in fire activity here over the next couple of days with the extremely hot temperatures. And you can see this orange highlighted area here is the fire weather watch issued by the National Weather Service, and that is in effect for the next few days here. That ends Saturday, but it may be extended based on how hot some of these temperatures are. So keep that in mind here as well. And then 6 to 10 day temperature outlook through the end of August, still showing that signal for above average temperatures, a pretty strong signal here across the Pacific Northwest. But then we are looking at a little bit of an above average precipitation signal going into the end of August, and this may have to do with some of those forecasts that we've been seeing, bringing some potential thunderstorms into the area and some monsoon moisture out here over the Intermountain West. So stay tuned for more on that over the next few days. And thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to Western Washington Weather and follow me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and the Western Washington Weather Facebook group, as I do a lot of updates with this heat wave. So stay tuned, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.